And sometimes you get inspiration and it just comes and you're not even sitting down and practicing, and you actually stop whatever you're doing and you get into it. And that's great. I love those. When I go on walks, sometimes in the shower, the shower thoughts kind of thing, my mind is allowed to free and go to places and wander. And that is something that we've kind of lost in this technological age. We've lost the ability to let our mind wander because boredom is no longer an option. If you're bored, you can always entertain yourself. You literally have in your pocket a thing that can tell you everything. Anything in human knowledge, anything that we know or think we know, or disinformation, even as we've seen with Facebook and right wingers and shit. All of those things are at our fingertips at all times. Hulu, Netflix, whatever. You can watch it on your phone. And so instead of being bored and allowing yourself to be creative and to use that boredom to come up with something interesting to do, or a new idea or a new concept, we are now succumbing to the babysitter. You know what I mean? This is the fucking virtual babysitter. And it's so funny how you would think that us being able to cure boredom would be like a good thing, but it's actually a curse. The phone is a blessing, and I am not anti-technology, as you guys know. I'm a fucking tech nerd, dude. But that being said, I understand that it is a double-edged sword, and with all this great power and information comes great responsibility with it. We do have to be a little bit more responsible with our time. But how can we be responsible with our time when the apps are literally designed to steal your attention? They are literally designed to, when you're not using them, to alert you, to bring you back in, because your attention is currency. Your attention is money to them. It is advertiser money. All these social media platforms are free because you are the product. And I know that people know this. This is not new information. But when you think about how our entire world is designed with algorithms that all have their own selfish interests, like stealing your attention for ad revenue for whatever company that app is providing, you're competing with a bunch of forces that are not necessarily aligned, right? YouTube is not speaking with Facebook directly. Sometimes the cookies are, sometimes the ad sharing can be, right? But that's not like Facebook saying, okay, YouTube, I'll let you have Kevin for 30 minutes and then you got to send him over to me. It's not like that. They're all competing for your attention all the time. And so sometimes the only way for us to really break free from the phones is to use the built-in screen time feature, which for iOS users, I'm sure Android probably is the same thing, but for iOS users, it lets you know you can like lock yourself out of apps for after a period of time if you've hit the limit. I found that when I did that, I ended up disabling it, and so obviously it didn't work for me. I'm too socially conditioned. But even just setting the phone aside, not having it in the same room as you, I know is a trick that a lot of people do. And it is effective. It's been proven to be effective that if a phone is literally not in the same room as you when you're doing work, you are more likely to stay on task. And that tells us that, we basically have our little dopamine hits in our pockets at any given time. And so anytime you're bored or you're distressed or whatever, we can just hide away in the phones instead of confronting the feelings and confronting the reasons why we might be feeling that. And when you don't pay attention to your emotions and you don't pay attention to where your mental state is at, it can degrade really quickly. And you then, because you're not aware of it, you then lose the source of where this degradation's coming from. And so the longer you spend in your phone not paying attention to how you're feeling, the more disconnected you become with your spirit and your body and your mind. And I found that during this pandemic, instead of using that time to be creative, which, by the way, you did not have to do. This is a traumatizing thing, and there is no reason why you needed to be productive at all during this horrific experience that we've all gone through collectively as a globe. So this is by no means a shame on anyone who was not productive, because I was not one of them, right? I was not a productive person during the pandemic. But in that time, I grew disconnected from my mind, I grew disconnected from my body, and I grew disconnected from my spirit. I felt disconnected from everything. I was disconnected from my friends, like physically. I literally was not able to be near them. And I was disconnected from, whatever I believe my purpose to be. And I'm a big believer in that you create your own purpose, and that there are some things that I think you are inherently born to do, assuming you go all in with that, right? You have to go all in on the thing that you kind of know that you're born for. And sometimes you don't know what that is for a long time. But when you do figure out whatever that thing is that really scratches the itch, that really feeds your soul, you have to go into it. And that doesn't mean you have to make your whole life around it, because not everybody is destined to work a job that is perfectly in line with their soul, right? This system is not designed that way. Unfortunately, our system is kind of shitty and is designed to just squeeze productivity out of workers and exploit them for profit. So we already know that that's an inherent flaw of the system. The system is never going to allow you to just blindly do what you love and make all the money. Like, that works for some people, and some people will be able to do that. But the reality is not everyone's going to be able to do that. So what can you do in the time that you do have that is not tied to your work, which is providing you sustenance and food and housing and shelter? What can you do with that time that you have that you can actually spend on what feeds your soul? So for some people, feeding the soul is going to be a physical exercise of some kind. For some people, it's going to be painting and art. For some people, it might be math and science, right? For some people, it might be astronomy. For some people, it might be cosplay. You know what I mean? Whatever your thing is, nothing is too small or insignificant. If it feeds your soul and it makes you feel good, then it is by no means a waste of time. And in fact, it is actually a perfect use of your time if you personally get a lot of joy out of that thing. So I want to encourage people to do the thing that you really enjoy in the time that you do have. And if there is a possibility to make it, a career, then do it. If you can, if you think it's feasible and you think that there's a way that you can do it. And that doesn't mean you need to know everything all at once or in the beginning. But if you have that feeling of like, there might be some viability as a career here. And with certain talents, there is. And with certain talents, it's like not only is there viability, but it's actually really plausible and possible, where maybe it's not as high competition as trying to be a rapper or a singer or whatever. Like, obviously that competition's crazy, right? The odds of you breaking free, it's very slim. It's not that it's impossible, and if you meet the right people, whatever, of course you can do it. But, maybe that's a little more improbable than somebody who maybe is like a really good engineer, right? And there's a lot of jobs out there that somebody could go do that thing and become the Michael Jordan of engineering. So for certain people, it's like your skills and what you're passionate about might be perfect for you to make a career out of. But even if it isn't, it doesn't need to be something that you need to make money off of. Capitalism has us thinking that everything needs to be monetized. It doesn't. Sometimes you need to do things for the feeding of the soul, for the just the fun of it. And there's nothing wrong with doing something for the fun of it. There's nothing wrong with doing something because you love doing it. That should be the point of doing anything. We all have to do things we don't like doing, okay? That's fine. I accept that. That is a reality of living as a human being in this system for sure, and probably in any system. There's always going to be stuff we have to do that we don't really want to do, but we have to do it in order to achieve whatever we want to achieve. And that is fine. But we don't need to make every aspect of our life like that. We don't need to make every aspect of our life a thing that we do because we have to. Like, there's so many times where we end up sacrificing our time to the phone, honestly, or to Netflix or whatever. And it's not that you watch TV shows, enjoy them. That's what they're there for. And if that helped you get through the pandemic, by all means. Like, I watched a bunch of shows and movies in that time as well. I played a lot of video games. Get lost in those things. That's great. But don't lose too much time in just those things. Definitely try to diversify whatever you're doing so that at least some of those things are more active forms of entertainment rather than passive. Passive entertainment is totally fine and is by all means do it. But make sure that there's some active elements to what you do with your free time so that you're learning something, whether it's about yourself or about the skill or about the art that you're into or, whatever that hobby is. Just make sure that you spend that time there, because you'd be surprised what kind of lessons you can learn in a very specifically applied scenario. If you're doing something, and I'll give an easy example, if you're doing like art, for example, and you're learning how to draw or how to paint, in that process of learning how to draw, how to paint, you're learning a lot about life. You're learning a lot of general lessons that you can apply to pretty much anything. And that comes from having a discipline and a focus and an attention that you're bringing towards a very specific action or subject. And having that specific intention tied to a specific action is going to allow your mind to focus and narrow it down to learning a general purpose lesson. And it could be a lesson about determination. It could be a lesson about perseverance. It could be a lesson about repetition. It could be a lesson as simple as just understanding composition in your art, right? Coming up with a nice composition for whatever you're drawing. But those lessons, they translate. And the things that you learn about yourself in the process of pushing yourself and learning these new things, it's so invaluable. And that is something that I learn when I do these podcasts. I learn things about myself in the process of talking to you. I'm not an expert, dude. I'm fucking learning right along the way with all of you. I'm a regular person who has his own flaws and insecurities and mistakes. And I'm always trying to learn and be better. I mean, when I think back to some of the podcasts that I've done in the past, I've had some reactionary takes that now I don't think I would have those takes, right? But and maybe I disagree with some of the things that I said, especially on social justice warrior stuff. It's like, do I think some of those fringe people are annoying? Like, yes, I do. That hasn't changed. But what I think I'm more understanding of is like, I now understand pronouns, and I can understand like the people just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel as they do around other people, and they want that acceptance. And I think to give somebody the courtesy of calling them by their proper pronoun is like the respectful, obvious human thing to do. And you're kind of an asshole if you don't respect that. If somebody says, hey, call me they, them, then call them they, them, dude. It's not that fucking hard. And if you mess up, that's okay. As long as they know that you didn't like purposefully misgender them, like, dude, they understand it's weird for you to learn it at first. They're going to give you a pass as long as they can tell that the intent for them to be seen is there. And so there are certain things that I probably said on the podcast in the past that were more reactionary, more, I don't want to say anti-social justice warrior, because I don't feel like I was ever super anti-super justice warrior, but super social justice warrior, super justice warrior too, man. It's like the next level. But that being said, you know, those are some things that I've evolved and I've grown. And I like to think in the last several years, like, you know, there are a lot of things that I probably said in the past that I completely disagree with that I've grown from. And luckily, not everything's recorded on the internet other than my podcast. But, you know, not everything I've ever said in the world has been recorded on the internet. And so I'm able to learn and grow from it. And I don't need to be reminded of it every time that I've made a mistake, you know. And I think that that's not useful. I think it's important to call out people when they make mistakes. And to correct them. But I don't think it's important to keep harping on it when they've demonstrated a clear evolution. Now, if somebody makes a mistake, apologizes for it, and then continues to make the mistake over and over and over again and shows a repeated pattern of behavior, that is a different case, right? Then clearly they haven't learned and they just paid you lip service with the apology. But if somebody does something wrong and they apologize and they've clearly shown that they've really evolved from that point and they're really not demonstrating that same behavior, then to me it's like, okay, can we let things go for some people, you know? And I think being able to forgive and forget is important, not just for the person who maybe made the mistake, but it's also important for us, because when you hold a grudge against somebody, or when you think about someone in an ill way, especially people who you haven't talked to in a while, like, that only hurts you. It's only hurting you on the inside to hold into those hold on to those feelings. And when you're holding on to those feelings, you know, that energy is stored in your body in some form or another, whether it's creating cortisol in the brain, which is a stress hormone, which literally makes you feel worse. Or if it's physically like holding pain in your chest or your, you know, some other physical manifestation of that, because stress does manifest itself in physical ways in our body. It's not just a mental thing that we go through. And so I think it's important for people to learn, forgive, forget, and grow from things. And we need to allow people the grace of growing and learning from those things. And so I feel like I'm in a place right now that I'm coming out of kind of a dark era. I'm coming out of a dark period of my life, and I feel like I'm really growing into the man that I want to be, and it's really cool, and I'm proud of myself, and it's cool to say that out loud because, even though I still get frustrated with myself and I still need to work on my inner voice, not being so harsh and being such a critic, I do feel like I'm recognizing it and being mindful again. I've been meditating more again. I'm still not regular like I used to fucking meditate every day. I'm still not at that level anymore, but I am meditating a lot more, and I've meditated a lot more, at least, 3 or 4 days a week now. And so even just to get back to that level and to kind of come back into my own, it's part of the ebbs and flows of life, and you're obviously not going to have smooth sailing all the time. And so I'm now at a point where I'm coming out of a pretty decent low, being COVID and the things that came from COVID, to now, I wouldn't say this is a super high or anything, but I would say that I'm rising. I don't think I've peaked at the place that I'm at, and I think I'm starting to embrace and appreciate my artistry for what it is, and trying to find my voice again. And so I think that's partly why I'm bringing the podcast back with some degree of regularity. Maybe I'll bring guests on again, but as of right now, I'm not like equipped in the same way that I was, and I don't know how much of a fan I am of virtual podcasts, although I'm open to it. But for the moment, I think that the value for me in the podcast can be what I'm doing here, and the value that I think I'm going to find in some of the video content that I'm making. I don't know if you guys saw my review of a lens. I'm going to do some gear stuff, and I'll do some gaming stuff, and I want to do some cinematic shit and maybe some stuff kind of similar to what I'm talking about on the podcast, and turning that into some sort of more story driven video stuff, documentary style, I think, rather than fictional, because I don't have any actors, and it requires too much time, resources, and planning for me to try to have actors and coordinate with other people. But for me to at least be able to shoot some of my own stuff and really think about how I want to best convey something that maybe sounded good on a podcast, but could be sold in a better way, so to speak. The message could be clearer through a more visual presentation. So we'll see. We'll see what comes from my imagination. I'm not going to put any pressure on it. I know that those are some general ideas that I have. So you'll see as things evolve. I'm trying to get over needing to plan everything. So part of that journey is going to be me just failing my way through the first several videos. But that being said, I try to keep these solo podcasts to 30 minutes now, partly because of my camera recording limitation, but also partly because I think I'm more concise if I force myself within a very specific time limit, and I try to get my point across in as little words as possible with as little bit of rambling as possible. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate you all. Peace out, heavy mommies. Follow, like, subscribe, all that stuff. All the links are in the descriptions of all the podcast episodes on wherever you find podcasts, as well as in the YouTube channel. And then, of course, in my Instagram bio, I have links to my website, YouTube, etc., etc. So thank you again for listening. I appreciate you all. Peace out, heavy mommies.